All right, here we go. Well, welcome to another edition of Art Brunch, where we explore the wisdom of the arts, spirituality, and the great ideas. Glad to have you again. And this is our first stop on our art pilgrimage, Le Petit Palais. Now, a little quick review from last week for those who are new joining us. I'll begin with the books I recommended last week for any of you who could not join us. If any of you love travel and plan on traveling this year, you ought to check both of these out. They really help you get the most out of travel. So many times we look at travel as just an escape, a way to get away from stresses for a while. But the problem is once we return from our journey, 3 weeks later, we already need another vacation. We want to change that. We want you to come back more than you were when you left, and these books are a good starting point to help you achieve that. So let's review what pilgrimage is. In his book, Cousineau defines it as a transformative journey to a sacred center. It's that sacred center where we discover our true selves, where we become whole, where we find our inner conflicts resolved. Now, for those of you who were with me last week, did you do your homework? Did you treat yourself to a ceremonial meal? And maybe, as a little extra credit, did you set an intention or theme for your journey? If not, you can always do both of these this week. And one final review from last week. Here are the 7 stages of pilgrimage that Cousineau outlines in his work. The longing, we start there. We experience an inward desire to see the world differently, to be challenged and changed, to find ourselves anew and live life more fully. Then there's the call, and this is pretty self-explanatory. Sometimes the call arrives in just a feeling of restlessness, sometimes in a dream or a shock, a change of circumstances, a loss, a confusion, a question pursued but not yet resolved, a darkness. And then there's the departure, again, pretty self-explanatory. Daydreaming won't get us to our destination. We need to step outside of our comfortable place or whatever is keeping us stuck. And then we begin the pilgrim's way. Here we ask, what is our objective, our goal in taking a journey? Sure, we may want to acquire some type of new knowledge. Certainly, we'd like greater knowledge of ourselves. After all, Socrates, the icon of wisdom, told his students, know thyself. But even more than knowledge, the pilgrim is on the journey to experience something, to have a vital experience. And if you don't have a goal for your journey yet, you can make having a vital experience your goal. The labyrinth simply means that the journey will not be a straight line. We certainly may feel lost at times, confused, unsure. We need to expect it. All growth involves discomfort. Then there's the stage of arrival. We reach the end of the journey. But the end may not be a physical place. It may be something internal. It may come in the form of a resolution to a problem. And finally, we must bring back the boon. This is not simply a trip for us. All spiritual paths teach that in order to live a truly fulfilling life, we must serve others in some way. We have a responsibility to use our unique experience to enrich others. So we felt the longing, we've heard the call, and now we've departed. So let us begin with our first stop on the art pilgrimage road. We've arrived in Paris. Today we are going to visit the Petit Palais. It translates as the Little Palace. Now, as you can see, there's nothing little about it. Strangely, it's often overlooked as a destination for art lovers, at least foreigners coming to Paris, but that is something I hope to remedy today. One thing anyone who travels to Western Europe will notice is that the city planners across the Atlantic emphasize beauty in their public buildings. I wish that were the case in most of our cities in the United States, but it often seems, at least to me, you may feel differently, that speed in building and cost takes precedent over aesthetics. That's not the case, as I've discovered, in many European cities. Everywhere you look, there's some vision to bring a sense of awe. I think you will agree, beauty bypasses the brain and goes immediately to the soul. So just walking around many European cities, particularly Paris, is an art pilgrimage itself. The Petit Palais was built for the 1900 Universal Exhibition, like its neighbor, the Grand Palais. It became a museum in 1902. Designed by Charles Giraud, it is based on a trapezium shape. You remember the trapezoid from geometry class, right? And it's made up of 4 wings around a semicircular garden, bordered by a richly decorated portico. Inside this building, there's ancient Roman and Greek art. There's Eastern iconography. There's art from some of the great masters, like Rembrandt, Delacroix, Cézanne, Courbet, Corot, Monet, Rodin, Sisley, Pissarro, Gauguin, and Cézanne. But today I'm not going to focus on the art which hangs on the walls. I'm going to focus mainly on the building, both exterior and interior. For Charles Giraud made sure the grandest art to be seen here is the building itself. Here we see the dome and its cupola. The last phase of work took place just after World War I, so that means the building took over 20 years to be fully complete. That's patience in service to artistry and craftsmanship. That patience rewards the many art pilgrims who flock to the city. Below the dome is the intricate bas-relief that you see here. So many buildings in Paris have this feature. Paris cares to place beauty, myth, story in all the nooks of its buildings. Now you see the woman in the middle, probably symbolizing Paris. She might be Genevieve, the patron saint of Paris. I'm not 100% sure, but see that she's holding a ship. You see that? Here on the garden-facing side of the dome is the coat of arms of Paris, showing that ship. It's tossed on waves. Paris sees herself as a ship navigating rough waters. A little bit more on that in a moment. As we approach the entrance, we will notice that the designer Giraud achieved a successful blend of traditional and modern architecture. The gate we enter through is rather extraordinary. Designed by Giraud himself, it was immediately praised for its elegance and the virtuosity of its craftsmanship. Take a look at it. It also contains the coat of arms of Paris. See that right in the middle? The ship. And look, there's a Latin phrase above it. Fluctuat nec mergatur is Latin for tossed, but not sunk. At this museum, we will learn the history of Paris, which is one of many artistic and intellectual achievements, but also many battles and revolutions. Paris not only prides herself on her artistic and intellectual productions, she prides herself on her resiliency. As we ascend the stairs, we are welcomed by these sculptures, the Four Seasons on our left and the Seine River and its tributaries on our right. Abstract concepts and natural features are often featured as feminine. That tendency is worthy of a study in and of itself, but I don't really have time for that during this art brunch, but perhaps for a future art brunch, I will address it. Now, the River Seine is, of course, the main artery running through the city. But did you know that the river and its bridges since 1991 are an UNESCO World Heritage Site? The River Seine has been immortalized by poets and artists for millennia. Well, now let us enter the galleries. The Petit Palais houses a significant collection of decorative murals and sculptures created between 1903 and 1925. Again, no rush job. Art has its own time frame. Giraud wanted to lend his building the grandeur and dignity of an official palace for the people. And he created a program of work designed to glorify the city of Paris and to celebrate the benefits of art. The locations for the areas to be decorated were carefully chosen with this aim in mind. They're mainly in areas through which people need to pass, entrance lobbies, the garden, even the staircases. Now that we have entered, I want us to avoid focusing on the paintings that hang on the walls and even the sculpture, at least at first. I want us to continue to admire the art of the building. The first thing we should do when we enter the gallery is to look up. How many of us, when we think about displaying art in our home, think about the ceiling? Maybe the next time we consider purchasing art, we might consider commissioning an artist to paint a mural. That would certainly lend our home some gravitas, wouldn't it? The ceiling murals here retell the story of Paris through history from the Battle of Lutetia up to the French Revolution. Lutetia was the Roman name for Paris. But they also illustrate the values of modern Paris. The murals also illustrate the intellectual triumph of Paris. Look at that bottom mural. Hopefully you have a screen big enough to make out the details. Artist Ferdinand Humbert introduced a contemporary character into his composition in the form of an ordinary pedestrian in a hat and overcoat going down some steps. He's reading a book as angelic figures watch over him. He represents the insatiable desire for knowledge that Paris bestows on her visitors. Between 1903 and 1910, artist Albert Besnard painted 4 decorative murals in the symbolist style for the museum's entrance lobby. They represent matter, thought, formal beauty, and mysticism. Here is mysticism. Take a moment to look at this. I'm not going to explain it to you. I'd like you to take a moment and appreciate it in your own unique way. And here is formal beauty. Again, just take a moment with it. And now a little exercise. I'm not 100% sure if this panel is matter or thought, though I have a strong hunch. Take a look at it yourself and write in the chat what you believe it might be. Patrick, you ask about the scale of these. They're massive. Larger than any wall in your home. Well, it may help if you looked at the fourth panel and compare it. Now, I'm sorry, I don't have a higher quality image of this fourth panel, so maybe the details are a little fuzzy. But those smaller figures at the top are 4 infants who appear to be falling from heaven. So is this matter or thought for you? I'll tell you my own hunch in a little bit. Again, here's the previous one. I believe this is thought. Maybe the woman up top represents the implanting of higher ideas, but the rather sinister-looking robed figure speaking to the couple might represent earthly thoughts. In the South Pavilion, Georges Picard depicted the triumph of woman. It is one of the reasons in the last few years, well, let me go back. Paris, in particular, seems to be a city that has long honored its women. I believe that's one of the reasons so many expatriate women made Paris their adopted home. They felt more accepted here, freer to be themselves, and something that American expats, from Thomas Jefferson to the writer Henry Miller, have noticed. Paris and much of French high society do not segregate by gender at gatherings. Women are included in the deep philosophical, artistic, and political discussions that take place at salons. In fact, French women are the ones who organize the great salons. This is a striking work by artist Alfred Roll. The title, apotheosis, means the highest point in the development of something. The highest point in the development of something. I think this work is not only a recognition of the triumphs of Paris's intellectual and artistic life, but a call to all of us who view it to make our own contribution to continue that excellence. And now that we have looked up, it's time to look down. Why slap down an ordinary tiled floor when you can create art using mosaics? The Petit Palais has a large area paved with mosaics covering the floors of the galleries, wings, and first floor rotunda. In the Petit Palais, artistic beauty literally envelops us. Now, the entrance rotunda is the only space in the Petit Palais which is lit by stained glass. And it's not the colorful stained glass we will see in the grand cathedrals of Europe, but it has an intricate design we can also appreciate. And if we prefer to take the stairs to the next level, we are in for a treat as well. Even the wrought iron work is exquisite. The building is in every detail a feast for the eyes. Here we've reached the top of the stairs. And from here, we can still enjoy the view down below. Now it is time to come back to eye level and view what is directly in front of us. The French have always paid homage to great writers and poets. Maybe some of you find inspiration in paying respects to great writers like Dante on the left here. On the right, we see three figures. Well, you can only see two, the other figures on the backside of the statue. But there are three figures here that symbolize the defense of Paris. A woman dressed in the uniform of the National Guard leans on a cannon and holds a flag. She's an allegorical figure of the city of Paris. A young guard who places a final round in his rifle sits at her feet. And on the other side of the monument, hidden, there is a prostrate girl. She's sad. She has a miserable expression and appearance. She personifies the suffering of the civilian population. Many of the sculptures are plaster. Making plaster casts was the first step in the creation of public bronze sculptures. And in the 19th century, late 19th, early 20th, it was statue mania in Paris. Statues went up everywhere. Thankfully, the casts were preserved by the city department in charge of municipal, religious, and civil artworks. And those plaster casts are gathered in the Petit Palais. Aside from their aesthetic beauty, they are all that remain of the works that were melted down in World War II. This plaster sculpture is of Maria Derais. I don't know how to spell it. Pronounce it Derais. Maybe it's Derais. Derismes. Maria Derais, a 19th century writer, but more importantly, a feminist and suffragist. Now, you may have never heard of her, but Paris wants to make sure you will know her after your visit. I think one of the most moving pieces in the entire collection is this one, The First Funeral by Louis Ernest Barrias. For those of you raised in the Jewish or Christian tradition, you will know that this represents Adam, Eve, and their murdered son Abel by the hand of his brother Cain. The pathos in this work is striking. So is its beauty. Now, why create a work like this? Life is suffering. It has been that way from the beginning. Hatred, jealousy, greed for power, and the violence resulting from these emotions are an unfortunate reality among humanity. The French knew that all too well. This work was created less than 100 years after the reign of terror that the French Revolution devolved into. And here is Cain. He suffered too for his offense. He was doubly cursed. The first curse concerns the earth, which will never yield crops for him because of the spilling of Abel's blood. But Cain did contribute to civilization. He went on to build cities, namely the city of Enoch. Now, the second curse condemns Cain to immediately leave the cities he founds, to live as a fugitive and a wanderer. Now, this sculpture is not on the grounds of the Petit Palais, but you will pass it in the Tuileries garden on your way to the Petit Palais, so I included it. Now, let me ask you this. Do you believe that the story of Adam, Eve, Cain, and Abel is an historical fact? Well, I think most people do not. What are we to make of all these artists propagating these, if I can call it this, myths? They're stories created long, long ago that you would think would have been lost to history because they are perhaps, maybe not true in the historical sense. But artists continue to feel the need to express them anyway. Why is that? Well, artists know something that most of us modern people influenced by rationalism don't always get. Artists know that in order to tell the great truths of human experience and existence, they must lie. By that I mean they must tell it in myths. Joseph Campbell referred to artists as culture's myth makers. Now look at the title of this extraordinarily beautiful work. The French seem to have a love affair with suffering. I don't think they're masochistic, per se. I believe they feel it is essential to acknowledge suffering and death as a fact of human existence in order to fully appreciate life, and thus to choose to live fully in each moment. Art for the Parisians is the antidote, the balm for suffering. And that is why art is so essential to their life. And for our final stop at the Petit Palais, we visit its wonderful garden. Here we will eventually find a quiet place to sit, to pull out our journals and write our reflections. But first, there is a little bit more art to see in the garden. And as always, don't forget to look up when you are in the portico. Nor forget to look down. This luxurious floor surface was created by Facchina, a famous Italian mosaic artist. Well, all right then. We've all seen a lot. And after a while, the visual stimulation can seem almost overwhelming, no matter how beautiful and fascinating it is. So we need to take time to process it all. So let us take a seat to reflect on what we've seen, what thought journeys we have taken, and what it might mean for us moving forward. Well, I hope this virtual visit has inspired you to one day see the Petit Palais for yourself and allow the spirit of Paris to infect your own spirit. Next week, we will head south to the French city of Montpellier. I hope you will journey with me. Well, thank you very much for your presence. I would love to hear any reactions you might have to this visit. Floor is open. And if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them. And if you need me to move back to a particular slide, I'll do that for you.